The unprecedented pace of disruption and uncertainty makes leadership more relevant today than ever before. It's not position or power, but your leadership skills that help you to think in unique, creative ways. When faced with a crisis, a leader is forced to think and make critical decisions. A leader who empowers a team and gives the employees accountability increases the effectiveness of an organization. John Maxwell says, leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. Warren Bennis says, leadership is the capacity to turn vision into reality. And Bill Gates says that as we look ahead into the next century, leaders will be those who empower others. Today, I have the honor of welcoming an author and a consultant in project management, Lew Sauder. Lew Sauder is the author of Consulting 101, Project Management 101, and co-author with Jeff Porter of The Reluctant Mentor. He has been a consultant with top-tier and boutique consultant firms for over 20 years. He has also served outside of consulting as a client manager, where he sat on the other side of the desk, hiring and managing consulting firms. I'd like to begin by asking you, what do you think are 3 traits that a project manager or a leader should have to thrive in a disruptive economy?
Change is very scary to a lot of people. There's a lot of anxiety. So I think one of the key things that a leader has to have is optimism. People tend to fear that change. And I think a manager needs to show the team, changes are coming, but it's going to be for the good. We're going to be better off at the end of this, and really try to not paint too rosy of a picture, but look at the bright side of change. I also think kind of related to that is calm. In a changing economy like we have now, unemployment has just skyrocketed all over the world. We've seen a lot of people lose their jobs. Everyone has some anxiety about whether they're next. Just concerns about the uncertainty. So providing a sense of calm, I think, will help to relieve that anxiety. And then finally, I think you need to be intentional. And this implies a certain amount of focus, having a purpose. When people feel that anxiety, sometimes they freeze. Their brains just kind of shut down. And they feel overwhelmed and they don't know what to do next. We've seen this in the movies before, where a crisis hits, everybody freezes, but there's always that one person that steps up. He or she knows what to do, and starts telling people what to do. And you go here and you go there. And the people who are being led are usually grateful for just being told something to do, and it kind of have some meaning and purpose, because they weren't sure what to do next.
3 very interesting points you brought out: adapting to change, having calmness, and having an intention and focus. Mm-hmm. Now we come to, how does a leader respond to a crisis, and what is the most important part of that response?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's related to some of those things I just said, but I have always been, I'm based in the United States, and I've always been a U.S. history, maybe not a buff, but I've always liked U.S. history. I do a lot of reading on it. And one of my favorite U.S. presidents was Franklin Delano Roosevelt. From 1929 to 1932, the United States suffered a very deep economic depression. And Roosevelt was elected in 1932, and in his inauguration speech, he made that famous quote that we have nothing to fear but fear itself. And it really kind of put people at that calm that we talked about. You know, we were in this big crisis. He calmed them. He was very intentional. He put a plan together. He started executing it, and people followed him. People were felt that sense of calm. They saw his direction. There's the irony is that, you know, the New Deal, this plan that he put in place, didn't actually cause an economic recovery. You know, the United States suffered for several years after that, but it instilled that confidence in the people. And that's really what I think the important thing is, to instill that confidence, give them a purpose, let them know that they have a leader in charge.
Coming to taking care of your team, how do you keep your team motivated and connected all the time? And what can you do to support them during a crisis?
Um, I think one of the most important things you can do is have empathy for your people. You know, people deal with crisis in many different ways. Some people get stronger, some people freeze, like we talked about, and some people just don't know what to do. So in addition to those things I mentioned, you know, I think a leader needs to look at each person as an individual. They need to understand how each person is dealing with things, and try to help them deal with it as much as possible. You can't be a personal counselor to everyone, but I think just the act of letting other people talk it out really kind of shows that empathy. The leader may or may not be able to give them information that will calm their fears all the time, but either way, I think just being a listener, letting them know that they care, I think that goes a long way.
If you look back at your illustrious career, what do you think is one of the big challenges that you have faced as a lead, as a project manager, as a leader?
What do you think is the biggest challenge?
Yes.
Um, I don't know if I can identify like a single project. I've had a few challenging projects. It always comes down to communication and setting expectations, I think. Making sure that all stakeholders are appropriately informed. I've seen project managers, in fact, I did this probably early in my career, where you hold off communicating a certain risk or an issue, and it always comes back to haunt that person. You want the executives to know what's going on and communicate with them. Executives don't like issues coming up. They hate surprises, and the surprises are much harder to manage than knowing something's coming down the road.
I agree. Keeping everybody in the loop, it helps, because everybody knows where is the project currently, where is it going, where is it headed, and it helps to ease the issues here.
Yes, exactly.
Now, in this current norm today, what we have is people working in a virtual environment. There are so many tools out there, Zoom, Skype, and you say, and communication tools like Slack and WhatsApp and what you know. So how do you lead in such an effectively in such a virtual workplace?
Yeah, we're all doing virtual meetings, including the two of us today. I like to make those virtual meetings seem more like an actual meeting. It's an artificial feel, kind of, but you know, I'll use those first couple of minutes to chat with people and be cordial and just kind of do some small talk, kind of, you know, how was your weekend kind of stuff. Also, you know, throughout the meeting, I'll try to joke around and just lighten the mood a little bit. I also try to encourage people to use the video. I know some people are uncomfortable with that. Some don't want to see their coworkers seeing their bedroom, or, you know, some of them may have not dressed appropriately yet for the day. But I think being able to see each other makes a big difference. It cuts down on multitasking, because we can actually see you, and if you're typing an email or something, we can see that you're doing that. So I think there's kind of that, you know, being seen, and it forces you to pay a little more attention. And also, I try to get the quiet people a little more involved. This is a problem I've seen in actual in-person meetings, but I think it's a bigger problem in virtual meetings. If someone is uncomfortable with that virtual setting, you know, I try to get them through it just by realizing that, you know, talking virtually isn't that much different than talking in a physical meeting. It kind of gets them over that hump. So once they are kind of coerced to talk or encouraged to talk, they realize, oh, this isn't really so bad.
Very good points you brought out there. Actually, the first point about the balance, that is, it's not all about work. When you come to such a thing, try to loosen up and make everybody feel at home first before you actually go deep into the meeting.
Mm-hmm.
Keeping video on is a great idea because you get to see each other's expressions, facial expressions, the body language, and that helps to show your sincerity in what you're saying, whether it's in synchronizing with what you say. And finally, about sharing each other's problems and being there to support each other. So that's,
Yeah, it kind of goes back to that empathy of, making people feel at ease, just asking them how they're feeling really kind of breaks a lot of tension sometimes.
yeah. We come to the next question. At this beginning of this year, many companies were taken by surprise when the pandemic struck, COVID-19 pandemic struck. So how does one actually preempt such a risk and factor it into their plan, risk management plan?
Yeah, well, and as a project manager, I think it's just that, it's risk management. When we do risk management on a project, we talk about two concepts. We talk about the likelihood of this happening, but also the impact. And I think that's something that a lot of people tend to ignore. They look at the likelihood of this happening, but having a pandemic, if people were ever mentioned this in any kind of a risk assessment, I'm sure they had to give that a very low likelihood. I mean, how often does this happen? It's, what was it, 100 years ago or so? For many people, it's the kind of thing you see in movies. It's not real. It doesn't happen in real life. So a lot of organizations probably didn't plan for it. They discounted it because of the likelihood. But that other factor is the impact that it's going to have. This was very unlikely, but it has obviously had a huge impact worldwide. I compare it very much to disaster recovery planning. Companies invest a lot of money in redundant data centers in case of a major interruption to their service. The likelihood of that is low, but the impact is incredibly high, and that's why they do it. So I think we need to have plans in place for these low likelihood situations that could have a high impact in the future. I'm sure that people are going to include this type of a pandemic in their risk assessments, but I'm hoping that they also cover some other things that we normally wouldn't because of the likelihood being low, but because of that impact, they need to consider it.
Yeah, one difference was that we have had tsunamis and earthquakes, and we have had people,
Yes.
people tell you that there is a tsunami or an earthquake coming soon or a cyclone. But this was something that not many people actually guessed was coming along, and
Yeah,
that took many by surprise.
very many.
Coming to, what do you think is the future for project managers?
I think project managers and leaders in general, I think in the future, they're going to need to be much better with that softer side of management, being able to deal with people. This kind of goes to the empathy that I was talking about, but there are multiple reasons for this. Today, I think we have a much greater awareness and understanding of mental illness. Historically, if someone was suffering any type of or any form of mental illness, it was unfortunately, these people were considered weird or outcasts. At best, maybe people ignored them, or they might have been removed from the project for being too disruptive. I think the millennial generation has really advanced us incredibly on the awareness of mental health and dealing with it instead of just ignoring it or ridiculing it. And even outside of the mental health issue, I think other things apply. I mean, some people ridicule the millennials for this, but this generation has really opened our eyes to recognizing that each person is an individual and not just a component of the project plan, not just a group of tasks that they're going to do. So I think understanding the individualism is going to need to be considered much more in the future for any kind of a leader.
You brought out the point about mental awareness. That's so important because people are now closeted in their homes, in their rooms, and without even so much as going out to do their usual stuff. So how does, how do you keep them connected, and how do you take by actually this empathy is a very important point that
Yeah,
connect
and
them.
I think it kind of goes to, we talked about the meetings and making people feel at home. I also think maybe just having one-on-ones, doing a video call with someone one-on-one, whether it's scheduled or you just do an ad hoc call and say, hey, I just want to check in with you, see how you're doing, let them know you care about them. I think that goes a long way. They may not want to have the conversation, but once they do, I think they feel better afterwards.
Yeah. You talked about millennials, and my next question, the last question, is about them. What do you have any words of advice for them, these youngsters who wish to take up a career in leadership and project management?
Well, some of the things we talked about previously, I think, apply just to the leadership aspects. But if they would like to get into a career in project manager, for one thing, I would do a lot of reading on it, just to determine if this is for you, whether you're reading books or online blogs or something like that. But I'd also suggest finding a mentor. Find a project manager that you think is a good project manager, and observe that person. Meet with them occasionally, and ask them questions about their approach, their philosophy of project management, what really motivates them. That I think is a big help. And then finally, I would let your employer know that you have this interest. If they don't know, they're never going to give you the opportunities, but hopefully they'll give you some training, and maybe the opportunity to manage a small project on your own that your mentor or somebody else can oversee you and give you some pointers. And I think that would be a good way to get into a career in project management like that.
Great points about mentorship and taking the initiative to speak to your management about opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
That is so. It was very interesting. It is a pleasure for me speaking to you, and I thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and insights on all these questions. It was just an eye opener for me. Thank you so much, Lew.
Well, thank you, Sajeev. I've really enjoyed talking to you today.